All right, here we go. The end of Elmer and the Dragon. Last two chapters, chapters 9 and 10. This chapter is called Farewell. Chapter 9. Farewell always means goodbye. I'm thinking that Elmer and the Dragon are going to get back on their way. Do you remember where they were headed before they lost their way in the storm? Let's review yesterday, though. The canaries, King Can and Flute and the Queen and all the other canaries were kind of getting sick in the head, they thought, because they were dying of curiosity. Have you ever heard that statement before? You're so wondering about something that it just drives you nuts. Sometimes the excitement of a holiday gets you like that. You're so curious about what's going to happen and if it's coming and what that is and all of that. So the canaries were all caught up in that. Elmer helped them out. Elmer and the Dragon helped them out. Do you remember? They found that treasure. They were very excited. They had a celebration. Do you remember what was in the treasure? Well, let's see if I can find that picture. Here it is. All the things that were in the treasure. King Can was so grateful that he gave something to Elmer and he gave something to the dragon. Do you remember what those things were? Let's keep reading. Finish up the story. Chapter 9, Farewell. I think I ought to be getting home, said Elmer the next morning as he ate the last 10 tangerines. How do you feel, Dragon? Fine. Why, I could fly to the moon and back now. Good, said Elmer, because I think today is my father's birthday. He looked at the plates and the pots and the cups and the silverware and the bags of seed spread all over the pine needles and asked, King, what shall we do with your part of the treasure? Well, dear, said the king. Well, we can plant the seeds, but I guess we ought to put the rest back in that chest. But my gold, I must keep my gold. I insist upon at least one silver spoon, cheeped the queen. Then I'll save out the seeds and a spoon and 3 pieces of gold, suggested Elmer, who was anxious to be off. Better make it 5 pieces of gold, said the king. I really ought to give 1 to Flute. That's so nice. Elmer picked the chest and gave the key back to the king. Shall we bury it again? He asked. I suppose so, said the king, with tears in his eyes. I hate to think of it way down there, but at least it will be safe from robbers. But never mind about putting back the dirt. We can do that part ourselves. So the dragon carefully lowered the chest into the hole while Elmer put away the shovel. Then Elmer packed his knapsack with the 3 bags of gold and the sterling silver harmonica, carefully wrapping the harmonica in the burlap bag left from the rescue. Goodbye, everybody, and thanks for a wonderful visit, he shouted to all the canaries. You can count on me. I will never tell your secret to another soul. Goodbye, Elmer, and thank you again, said the king, who was already busy giving orders to the other canaries about filling up that hole. Flute rode on Elmer's shoulder as he and the dragon walked back to the cliff. Goodbye, Elmer! Please give my best to your mother. She really was awfully good to me, you know. I will, Flute, and goodbye to you, said Elmer, wondering if he didn't have some little thing to give Flute. He looked once more in his knapsack and found that he still had 3 pieces of chewing gum and half a package of rubber bands. I don't suppose you'd like to have these, he asked. I love them, said Flute. I'll keep them with my gold piece, and I'll be even richer than the king, because I'll keep my treasure where I can see it every day. Flute told Elmer and the dragon the best way to fly to Nevergreen City, and then Elmer hopped aboard, waving farewell to Flute and to Feather Island. Chapter 10, Elmer Flies Home. Did you hear in the last chapter what's going on that Elmer felt he needed to get back to? They flew and they flew, the dragon trying very hard not to look at or think about the wet, wet ocean below. Elmer sat watching their shadow rippling over the waves beneath them, feeling washed by the cool morning breeze. The dragon was strong and well rested, but nicely stuffed with skunk cabbages and ostrich ferns, and they didn't have to stop once when he shouted towards evenings, "I think I see land ahead." "So do I, and I think it's the coast of Popsicornia," said Elmer. "Yeah, I'm sure it is. There's Firefly Lighthouse. It won't be long now. It's just a few miles up the coast from here." "Where shall I land when we get there?" asked the dragon. "Now that I'm free, I should hate to be put in a zoo or a circus or something like that." "Well, it'll be dark soon. I think you can land on the wharf without attracting any attention. Of course, we'll have to be very quiet." They flew up the coast, passing the lighthouse and the village of Fruitoria and the town of Custard, and finally came to the outskirts of Nevergreen City. "There it is!" cried Elmer. "See, that dark patch is Evergreen Park. I live right across the street from there. Could you land on that long wharf just ahead?" "I think so," said the dragon, "but I do hope nobody sees me." He circled lower and lower and landed gently on the edge of the wharf. Oh no. Elmer slid off and whispered, "Gosh, it was fun knowing you. I'm going to miss you and flying and everything, and thanks so much for bringing me home." "It was fun, wasn't it?" snuffled the dragon, "and I'll never forget how you came all the way to Wild Island just to rescue me. By the way, Elmer, I really think you ought to have this beautiful gold watch and chain. I can't see it on me, and anyway, I don't know what to tell time means." "Are you sure? I could give it to my mother, but haven't I got something you'd like to trade for?" "Well, as a matter of fact, you do. I was wondering if you still had some of those delicious pink lollipops." "I have 4 left over," said Elmer, getting them out and taking off the wrappers. "Would you like all 4 at once?" "Why, yes," said the dragon. They stood there quietly in the dark, the dragon sucking 4 pink lollipops, and Elmer whispered, "Where will you go from here, dragon?" I'm going to go find my family in the great high mountains of Blue Land," said the dragon, thinking of his 6 sisters and 7 brothers and his gigantic mother and father. "I'd like to go there someday," said Elmer. "Well, maybe you will, but listen, I hear voices. Men coming down the wharf. Quick, you better hurry. Goodbye, dear dragon." You see what they're looking at right here? What do you think that is? The dragon flew up into the darkness just as 2 watchmen thumped by to make their rounds. Elmer hid behind a crate and heard one say, "Funny. I was sure I heard voices, and I know I heard something big flying over our heads." "Look, 4 lollipop wrappers," said the other watchman, who had been searching the wharf with a lantern. Said the first watchman, and then they walked back down the wharf. Elmer followed them at a distance, and while they were telling another watchman about the lollipop wrappers, he ran as fast as he could through the streets, through Evergreen Park, all the way home. He leaped up the porch steps, 3 at a time, yelling, "Mother! Daddy, I'm home! Happy birthday!" Mr. and Mrs. Elevator rushed to the door and threw their arms around Elmer. "Oh, Elmer, how glad we are to see you. You don't know how worried we've been these past 2 weeks. Where on earth did you go?" "I had an important job to do," said Elmer, staring at the living room sofa. "Why, there's my friend, the old alley cat." "Yes," said Mrs. Elevator. "As much as I've always hated cats, I just didn't have the heart to turn her away. She came to the door the day after you left, and I kept thinking, Elmer would love this cat. I really ought to take good care of her. And do you know, I've grown awfully fond of her in the past 2 weeks." Elmer rushed over to the cat and whispered, "I rescued the dragon, and he just flew home. He was right where you told me he'd be." "You did what?" asked Mr. Elevator. "Oh, nothing," said Elmer. "By the way, here's your birthday present." Elmer gave his father the 3 bags of gold and played Happy Birthday on the sterling silver harmonica. And here's a beautiful gold watch and chain for you, Mother. But where did you ever get these things? Gasped Mr. and Mrs. Elevator. You know what? That's a secret I can never tell, said Elmer, rummaging in the icebox for something to eat. THEEND. The end. Do you think Elmer's ever going to tell his secret? A little bit of different times back then, wasn't there? I don't know. I don't think my mommy and daddy would be that happy if I came back after running away. I'd have been in a lot of trouble. But Elmer has a secret. The baby dragon is going off to Blue Land. So there's one more adventure. But we're not going to read it next. Snot Stew was the book that we had almost as many votes for. We're going to read Snot Stew next. After Snot Stew, that's kind of a tongue twister, then we will go back to the adventures, the last adventure of the Dragons of Blue Land. So it looks to me like maybe Elmer and the dragon might get to see each other again. But before then, Snot Stew! We got a couple of cats as characters. We've got a dog. Dogs and cats sometimes get along. Maybe not in this story. We'll find out next week what happens in Snot Stew.